Welcome everyone to our Explore Bar presentation. Thank you all very much for coming. We hope you enjoy the presentation and have a look around. Hopefully you had a chance to look around at the information we've got on the sides. If you haven't, don't worry, there's time after. Basically on the right hand side here, we've got from this side our major project work, which we'll explain. Our routes, the days, so marked out where we went. Our logbook of each day there. Our finances, our budget as well. And then at the back behind you, we've got all our kit laid out, which we took with us. We've got some soup over there, some barley soup. Please have a try. We'll explain where we got it from in a second in the presentation. And then over here, we've got all our souvenirs, all our things we brought back, memorabilia. So again, by all means, have a look. So first off, I'm not expecting the fire drill. Exits are that way, and through the door here on my right. Basically, this presentation is the final part to our Explore Bar award. So we have to do a presentation about what we did, about the trip, about preparation, about everything, finances, everything from the start to beginning, to be able to get an award, basically. It's one of the top awards in scouting, so you got the King's Scout Award at the top there. Along with the Scouts of the World Award, which is all about values and community and international, and the Explore Bar Award is also up there. So that's why we're doing it. Who are we? So us guys here, we all went to Switzerland as a team, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves. So
I'm Sebastian, I'm the Deputy District Youth Commissioner for Horsham and also a Section Assistant at 4th Horsham Scouts.
I'm Ned, and I'm an Assistant Scout and Beaver Leader for 2nd Horsham.
I'm Thomas. I don't have any positions like these guys do, as you can see. But I went through scouting in First St Leonard's Forest, and I'm now a network member for Scouts, as are we all. Yeah.
And I'm Chris. I'm the District Youth Commissioner for Horsham, and I'm connected to 3rd Horsham as well through the Scout troop. Okay, so what is the award? I said a little bit about it earlier. It's a top award, and basically the award it's a 10-day expedition in a foreign country to meet local people and learn about the culture you go see. So we went to Switzerland, okay, in July this summer. We apologise about the delay in presentation. Different things came up, such as the Queen's funeral, unfortunately. But basically, so the 10-day expedition, you have to be walking or travelling for 50 hours. We chose to walk, but you can do it by boat, cycle, canoe, whatever you want to do, really. But we chose walking because we thought we can meet most people this way. So we'll go through the presentation, and it will show you what we did in preparation, so how we fundraised, how we wrote a budget, how we packed our kit, what kit we took, and then our routes as well, and transportation. And then we'll show you each day of our trip and expedition as well. Different requirements of the award include the obviously expedition in Switzerland, but you also have to agree a budget before you go and keep a logbook of the trip. So every day we have to write down what we did, where we went, who we met, all those kind of things, which are all over there if you want to read. And then you also have to complete projects. So we have to complete one major project, which lasts about 15 hours across the whole 10 days, and then 10 minor projects as well, which we'll explain in a little bit.
Yeah, so as Chris said, with the award, we had, why we went to Switzerland, we've got free choice with the award where you go. You can choose anywhere in the world, but we found Switzerland a really good place. It fitted very well. We all enjoy hiking a lot, so we looked around at different places going hiking, the Alps, everything. We spoke to Dave, and he told us we found Switzerland a great place. We also wanted to go to Kandersteg. For those of you who don't know, it's an international scout centre. It's a permanent mini jamboree that was set up by Baden-Powell, and that's somewhere that we, having looked about it as Switzerland as a place, we thought would be really interesting to go to meet people. And also, we compared, a lot of it, thinking about the budget was comparing flying, but we actually ended up taking the train. We took the Eurostar and then did Interrail through the country, and that actually became much more affordable than just flying out there and then arriving somewhere completely different. So with it being in Europe, that was quite useful. Now, also, at the time we went, Sebastian himself, he was, when we were there, we had an in-country contact in Geneva, if we were to need it, so that also kind of entered us around Switzerland or kind of France and the Alps area, so that led us to that decision. There we go. So, in order for us to prepare, the first thing to do was to go through the preparation before we could even go. So we had a meeting with our mentor, which is Dave, thank you obviously for that, it was brilliant help. And that got the process started. We were able to agree our deadlines when we needed to get things done by. Then our next biggest thing to do was sort out our budget and then begin our fundraising. It's something that we spent a lot of time viewing different tasks. We ran pub quizzes, you'll hear more about them. But we needed to get the money in once we'd worked out how much we needed, which Tom will go through in a minute. We then also had to show we were competent to go. It's obviously 10 days basically on your own in a foreign country. We had to show that we were able to do it. So we did practice hiking on the Downs with Dave. We also did our gold DV practice up in the Peak District, all to show that we were ready to go. We also had to gain permits because Seb was under 18. We had to have our nuts away to go, as well as our hill walking because we particularly wanted to stay in the mountainous area. We didn't just want to stick to the valleys, we wanted to see everything Switzerland had to offer. And then we were able to get on, make our bookings and organise our transport.
So another part of the award is to produce a budget, decide how much you're going to spend, and then ideally stick to that on the trip. So we went through and we decided we wanted to have around £1,000 each to last us the whole trip for everything that we needed to pay for. And through means of fundraising and donations and grants, we were able to raise in excess of that, which was really good. And then, as you can see here, the expenditure over the whole trip did come less than that, less than what we raised, which was really good. On the left here, we've got a breakdown of the spending across the whole trip. As you can see, most of it came under transport. That included our Interrail tickets, which was most of the transport that we took across the 12 days that we were out there. And then other things, accommodation, food, we wanted to have about £20 a day each, £20 a day for all of us to pay for the food. So yeah, overall we were able to stick to that budget, which was good. Yeah.
So as Ned mentioned, part of the award was proving your competency, so proving you're actually able to go out there and complete the expedition. So using our skills that we learned in Scouts, such as map reading, etc., we completed our practice expedition in Easter, that was in the Peak District. So we also used this as part of our Gold DV. And then a week or so before that, we had a training day in the South Downs where we showed Dave that we were competent in map reading, bearings, pacing, and stuff like that. So that was really helpful for us before we went into Switzerland to know that we were capable of being able to navigate out there and not get lost entirely. So over the planning period, we were refining and reducing our kit. So we were deciding what equipment we needed to take and what we didn't. So we realised that over the 10-day expedition and 12 days we were out there, that we would need different equipment than what we would normally take on, say, a DV or a camp away. And we'd also need better quality equipment to last us the time and be comfortable as well. So a notable thing that we decided was taking a chair could be helpful because we were doing a lot of walking. We walked over 50 hours while we were out there, so a bit of comfort in the evening might make us walk better. So that was one of our big things that we decided would be helpful to take.
Okay, so the major project is a big part of what you do when you're on the expedition for Explorer Belt. The idea is that across the whole expedition you spend 15 hours trying to learn about the culture, learn about the country, and answer one particular question which we decided with our mentor about Switzerland and the way that they live. So there was a number of ways. Oh, sorry, I should go back to the question we were answering was to explore how water sources such as rivers, lakes and glaciers affect the different local communities they serve and their lifestyles. So we thought that particularly was something that was a question to answer. The ways that we found out about these things was to speak to locals, talk to people about how it affects the way they live, to go to tourist information points, to go to tourist attractions, such as the waterfalls and a hydroelectric dam, information boards, visitor attractions, we said that one, and to do, doing our research before we went to find out about how it is that it affects the way they live. So these are the primary things we found out about how it changed the way that Swiss people live. Tourism, encouraging immigration, domestic uses such as drinking water, we saw a few of the filtration plants, crop irrigation, natural disasters. There was big flooding in Brienz in 2005, which we spoke to one of the locals about, how it affected that town. Historical uses, we went to an open air museum where they had water mills and bone mills, and it said all about how the communities shared out the water sources to help grow their crops. Personal uses, people who go out and swim in the lakes each day, that really helps them with their mindset and their mental health. Hydroelectric power, as I said, we'll talk later about the dam that we went to, which is a really big dam that produces a lot of the power for many of the towns in the area. And then transport, such as the ferries along the lakes and things like that. So that was our major project, which you can see over here on the right-hand side. Is a summary of all the information we collected.
So as well as our major project, like I said, we have 10 minor projects. These were set by ourselves, our mentor, our friends, our family, our peers. Anyone really could set a minor project for us. They should last about an hour each, so take an hour to complete. Some examples, these are all our minor projects, if you can read them. We've got one being photographed in local dress, so one day we had to go search somewhere to find somewhere to put on some local things. We were trying to get some lederhosen, but we couldn't quite find that, so we got the best thing, which we'll show you, I think, in a minute. We had to visit a local place of worship, a museum. Our mentor Dave actually gave us cook a rosti from fresh. So it's a traditional Swiss dish. So we had to find the ingredients and learn on the go how to make it. Luckily, we did take a grater with us because we thought ahead, prepared. But that was a challenging one, we thought. It was quite fun as well. And we had a few different ones that were quite difficult as well. So we had this one, try and play a Swiss horn. You can see we did succeed in the challenge, but that was an extremely difficult challenge, although you'd think it'd be quite easy because Swiss horns are, Swiss, easy, right? Not as common as you think, yeah, quite hard. And obviously fishing, we had to catch a fish. Again, we didn't take fishing rope, fishing lines, anything like that, any nets. We should have, we didn't. But also fishing in Switzerland, you need a permit everywhere you go. If you don't need a permit, then it's pretty much rapids, so there's no fish in there that you'll be able to catch. So that was also really, really difficult. But we did accomplish all of them, bar one, but we went with 11 projects because we knew we couldn't do the 11th before we went. It was trying to do a service project at Karnstedt International Scout Centre, but they told us before we went there wasn't any room, they couldn't do it for us. So we luckily had 10 and we completed them all.
Yeah, so the last thing we had to kind of finalise before we went out there was the route, where we were going to go. This just gives it an overview. There's far more detail with our elevation profiles and the maps over there that we took, but the route was something that we focused, once we decided our project of waterways, we really designed the route to fit around it. So we wanted to come down into Geneva. It was our starting point. We didn't spend loads of time there, but being one of the largest lakes spanning, Switzerland and France, we wanted to start there. It seemed like a really interesting place to go. We then worked our way, if on the map you can see that's actually where we stayed. We kind of went round clockwise from the points on the right-hand side, and that was our accommodation. And that we worked our way round following Lake Thun, Lake Brienz, up through the gorges, and then back round across the mountains. We kind of followed waterways wherever we went, and that helped us give a focus to our route. We then returned back through Geneva, and that was our last day before leaving home again. On there is also a summary of how long we spent walking, so we can like 50 hours, we spent 53, but we also made use of public transport from trains, buses, cable cars and boats, because that's just not done in this country.
So this was our day zero, as we like to call it. It was us leaving home and going to Geneva. Unfortunately, it wasn't plain sailing, as one would think, considering it was just trains, but oh well. So we had a 5 o'clock start, we met in Cranley at 5 o'clock, and then, unfortunately, on that day there was a rail strike, and there was also fires on rail sides, and I think there was some fires in Croydon, which meant no trains were running. So kindly Ross agreed to drive us to London so we could get there in time, when we realised we wouldn't be able to get there any other way. So we arrived in London in good time and went through to these Eurostar security and check-in, and Eurostar was unfortunately delayed by another half an hour. So when we got to Paris, we had 5 minutes contingency to get across the city to get our next connection, which was quite stressful, it turned out.
The metro is not an easy place.
The metro is not an easy place to understand. So we ran through Paris to get the train, and then we eventually arrived in Geneva at 6 o'clock in the evening, and then we had to go find our dinner. So these are some pictures from day zero. They include our evening dinner in Geneva, as well as us arriving and leaving London. You can see a video of us actually walking into St Pancras there. And then we actually bought takeaway pizza in Geneva and had dinner on the lake, sitting right by the lake. So that was sort of our major project work for the day, really, is looking at the lake, seeing how everyone was using it at night. So there was a lot of people actually sitting there eating their dinner at night, which was a really cool thing to see, everyone just sitting there. And this is day one.
So day one, we needed to get out of Geneva, really. So our focus, which we mentioned, was around the Bernese Oberland region, which Geneva is not in. So we had to get from Geneva to Spiez. That was where our next day finished, and our campsite was. So we woke up quite early, went and got breakfast, and then we needed some gas. We didn't have any gas because you can't take it through customs, and if you don't have gas, we can't cook anything. So that was our first challenge, really. We woke up, got breakfast, and had to go find somewhere. Luckily, they had the Decathlon in Switzerland, so we went there, got some gas, and that was fine. We then visited a few different things in Geneva before we went out. So we visited the UN site in Geneva, as you can see, and also we went and quickly visited the Red Cross Museum as well, because they're quite near. After that, we then got the train to Bern and got lunch there, and then we visited the bear park, historic bear park. So if you don't know, Bern is all based around bears. The emblem's a bear. I think Bern might mean
It's named
bear.
the name of bear.
So basically in Bern, they used to have bears captivated in pits, small little pits. They don't anymore, because human rights, animal rights, sorry. But what they now have is purpose-built bear parks, which you can see some pictures of the bears there, which still probably aren't big enough, but they're there. So we visited that, as we thought it was quite cool, quite interesting. And they also have water there, obviously, to allow them to bathe and stuff, which we obviously related back to our major project. After we did that, it was actually by a river, and we saw just a random Swiss man swimming down this very fast river, which again was another way which we realised how the water sources were used. Clearly he was going to work or something, whatever it was. After we did that, we then back on the train and went to Spiez, which was in the Interlaken region. We then needed to pretty much get to our campsite because our check-in time was about 6 o'clock, and we got there about 5. But what we didn't realise was how big the hill was to the campsite. The mountain, sorry. So we had to hike up this mountain very quickly with our bags on, which we weren't prepared for, really, because the first day we were thinking, oh, nice easy day. It wasn't. In like 30-degree heat as well. But once we got there, eventually, we bought dinner and then cooked it and then went to bed.
Yeah, I should say most of it was about 30-degree heat. That was throughout the whole thing. It was really, really hot. So yeah, another day that was very warm. We started in Aisha, the place just outside Spiez where we were staying. Back down the mountain to Spiez, where we were able to visit the castle. It was one of our cultural sites that we visited. and this is where we were able to do the local dress, which should be here. There you go, in the middle on the top. That's us wearing some of the dress that, and then the ferry along Lake Brienz to walk from the ferry terminal along to Brienz on Lake Brienz. Confusing, yeah. And then that evening we were staying at a campsite on the lake. Yeah.
So our next day, once we'd woken up from Brienz, we went to a place that was called Ballenberg. Now, if anyone's been to the Wilden Downland Museum, it's like that, except it's Swiss, and it's bigger, and it's an incredible place that was able to show the culture and the history of the country. They've got loads of the buildings set up, and they do a lot of the traditional activities and things like that. So it really enabled us to see a bit about the history of the country, not just what it's like now, but what it was like previously. We're photographed in the picture there with two members of their staff. Marcel was one of them, and they had been baking pizza in a traditional oven, and we got speaking to them. We found that wearing scarves, people wanted to talk to us, they wanted to know what we were doing, so they engaged with us, and we found out about what they were up to, and they were actually running a training course for other people about traditional ways of cooking, and we were able to try some of that out with them. We then went around the museum for the day to see what there was. We've seen the cheese making. That was actually, then we went to the smokehouse with the sausages, and that's slightly pictured over there with the food we've prepared this evening. And that's also where we found the barley soup. This was something, again, we just walked into one of these buildings, and it was something that had been prepared, and they were talking about the traditions of Switzerland. But that wasn't entirely the only thing we did that day. We also fitted quite a lot in. That we went to our campsite, we set up, and then as we'd been there, we found out that there's a gorge called the Arschluck Gorge, and that was opening that evening. It only happened to open on the day we'd been there, and it was all lit up at night, so having had our dinner in the pouring rain, we decided to go back out and try and find something else. It was incredible to see the way the water the power it has to cut through the mountain and everything. It was very fast flowing, it's a great experience to go at night when it was all lit up as well. Now in the photo, we were fascinated by the Swiss engineering by the end of this. They decided, they put their trains through the mountains and everything, and we thought that was of particular interest. Well, it just appeared there.
Okay, so these next 2 days were the majority of our walking days, our pure walking days. So initially we took the bus from Meiringen, where we'd been staying, up to Große Scheidegg, from where we hiked up the mountain to Fürst, and then continued to our accommodation further up the mountain. So our height profile estimated that we climbed around 1,000 metres that day, which I think is taller than Ben Nevis, I think. So we met lots of people on the way up. Again, wearing scarves meant that everyone was really interested in what we were doing and why we were walking up there. So in this picture there is Matthias. We met him on the way up, and he was actually cycling 80 kilometres around and up and down all the different mountains, including one we'd just taken the bus up. So that made us look a bit lazy. But then we completed the Fierce Cliff Walk, which is the bottom middle picture there, and that was one of our minor projects. And doing this, we noticed the amount of tourists in the area. It was a very touristic area there. And Tom actually spoke to two Grindelwald locals called Richard and Sue on the walk. Let's go scroll down the notes. They didn't like the amount of tourists in the area because it was changing their environment as well as causing a lot of pollution. We also, on the way up, we met a team of scouts from Bristol walking down the mountain, and they were actually staying at Kandersteg, where we'd be staying a few days later. So we sort of crossover. We did try and look for them at Kandersteg, but couldn't find them, unfortunately. So they're halfway between Fürst and our accommodation. We found a lake in the mountain, which was actually the picture on the front. That was the lake set in the mountain there. And we actually saw lots of people swimming in it and diving off the mountain into the lake, as well as picnicking around it. There was a lot of people that had bought their food up the mountain. There was actually a cable car that got you to Fürst, but we walked instead. So they brought all their food up with them and sat around this lake in the mountain having their lunch, which is a very nice thing to watch. All the Swiss people with their bread and cheese eating around the lake. And then we finally walked to our accommodation at the very top of the sunset that evening over the mountain, because it's a very unique experience being taller than most things around you, just watching the sun go down, except from the mountains that are behind us that were even taller. And then we spoke to Henry at the mountain hut, who actually recommended that we wake up early to watch the sunrise, which we did the following day to get some more lovely views.
Yeah, so as Seb said, we did get up really early to watch the sunrise, which was, and again, another amazing thing to do, and that we only found out by talking to the people. We were able to see that and get up extra early because it was something you could never do anywhere else. We put a lot of thought into, before we went, where we wanted to go. So we'd chosen to stay in campsites for a lot because we thought this was one of our most expensive accommodations for the trip. And we really wanted to be there, to be on top of the mountain and to have that experience of going up it and seeing what it had to offer. So after we'd had breakfast, which we were very lucky, it was all prepared that day, it was part of it being included, we then hiked down to a place called the Shinka, stopped off at a mountain hut another mountain hut on the way, before continuing that part of the hike down. When we got to the place, the Shinka, we had a quick look around it before we had to continue. It's a very traditional Swiss place, lots of alpine plants and alpine gardens, and then we took, which is pictured up there, a cog railway back down into the Lauterbrunnen Valley. Now, that we then spent, when we got to the Lauterbrunnen Valley, just very quickly, we spent a little bit of time there. It was a key place that we found out in our preparation. It's actually called the Valley of Waterfalls because there are 72 waterfalls on it. So it fitted in quite well with our project work, but was equally an amazing, with all these waterfalls just coming down into it, feeding the Lucerne, which was the river in it. We equally had left our accommodation unbooked that day because we wanted to see where we'd end up and what the Lauterbrunnen Valley was like to get a feel for it and where maybe the best campsite would be. We found one which was situated in quite a good place. It was actually right by one of the waterfalls, which was brilliant to see, where we were able to go up it one evening. And yeah, we did that, and it also, we were able to then go out and explore the days from that.
So, first full day at this campsite, we didn't have to go anywhere this day, pack down our tents. We luckily allowed a few days, so it was really nice because we'd been walking, packing up our tents every morning and putting them out every evening, which was a lot of effort. So luckily, we could just have a little lie in. So what we did this day is we did a little bit of catching up our logbook and things we missed, maybe previous days, people we spoke to, things we did, whatever like that. And then we went into Lauterbrunnen, into the town, village, and visited a local church, as you can see there. One thing we did was, it was a minor project visiting a church, place of worship, sorry. But what we did, instead of visiting just one, we found so many along our route, we thought, why not visit them all? So we actually compared different churches and places of worship along our route, which was really nice because we had some in the top mountains, some in Ballenberg, one here. So it's quite interesting to see different types of churches and obviously also different religions as well. After we did that, we then got lunch at a local cafe because we saw they had cheese fondue. So we thought we'd treat ourselves and get that. And then after that, we went to the Tremmelbach waterfalls, which you can see in the middle there. And it was basically a huge waterfall inside the cliff, which about 20,000 litres flow through it per second. Yeah, per second. Which, to comprehend, is ridiculous amounts of water. But obviously this formed a huge part of our major project work as well. It was one of the 72 waterfalls Ned mentioned that goes into the main river. But we looked around there and we talked to some locals about what that was about. After that, it was a long day. After that, we then went back into Lauterbrunnen and went to the Tourist Information Office. We had two main questions for them. One was about our minor projects because we had no idea how we were going to do catching the fish and how we were going to cook a local meal. One of our projects was to cook a local meal. So we needed to find local food, local markets. And unfortunately, the market in Lauterbrunnen was the day before we got there. But they mentioned, the Tourist Information Office person mentioned that the local farmers had vending machines where they made cheese and then put them in there. So you just walk along their farm, use the vending machine and get a block of cheese. So we did that, and we went to a local butcher's as well for our meat, and then a local market shop kind of thing for the rest of the items, which you can see in all the photos there. And then this is what we made, one of the minor projects. The other thing we went to the information office for was to ask about fishing, because can't do it. And they had no clue. So it was very annoying, because we still had no idea how we were going to do this. And it meant we had to carry on asking those people. Yeah, that's all for day 2, 3, 5, 6. 6.
Great. Yeah, so day 7, again, we woke up in Lauterbrunnen. This was our last full day spent in Lauterbrunnen. So we began with getting the cog railway up the mountain into a town called Wengen. Yeah, good, Wengen. Which was an interesting town actually, because there's no roads going into or out of it because of its height up in the mountains. So everyone goes up by train, cars and everything. So that was really cool. We walked around there. We actually met a lady who had been working at our campsite as one of the cleaners. She recognised us because of the scarves. So we had a conversation with her about what we were doing in the area. And then from there, we got a cable car even further up the mountain. That's where we are here. We're talking to one of the operators called Chris, and we were talking to him, and we spoke to him about our minor projects that we had to do. One of which was still the Swiss horn, which we hadn't found. We just mentioned it casually. We weren't expecting too much to come of it. Surprisingly, he said, you go down the other side of the mountain, just halfway down the mountain, there's some Swiss horns that you can just play, just sitting there randomly. So that point, we kind of changed our plans. We had to go down the other side of the mountain, get off at the middle station on the cable cars, and then walk up from there, and we can find the Swiss horns, which you see in the bottom left-hand corner. It was quite random, but it was really great for our project. So after that, we went down into Grindelwald, where we could get the railway back round to Lauterbrunnen. And on our way back, we took a walk up to the Starbuck waterfall, which is a very famous landmark. A lot of the photos you see of Lauterbrunnen feature the Starbuck waterfall. It's one of the tallest, I think it is the tallest free-falling waterfall in Switzerland. At the time that we were there, and we found this interesting, it was very, very weak flow on the waterfall. We spoke to one of the tourist officers. He said this is probably the lowest he's seen the waterfall ever flowing. Obviously a lot to do with the heat of the summer, climate change. It just seems to be getting weaker and weaker all the time, which was a real shame. But again, it's another example of way the water sources are used in attracting tourists and being like those landmarks that people remember in Switzerland. So yeah, the tourist officer was concerned that they were going to lose those, and that wasn't going to be good for their tourism. Yeah. So and then that night we went to bed again in Lauterbrunnen. It was good because our campsite, from where we were camping, we could see the waterfall. So that was one of our minor projects, was to sleep in sight of a local landmark, which was the Starbuck waterfall. Yeah, and that was the end of day 7. Yeah, good.
So we finished off that day waking up again in Lauterbrunnen. It was our last day there. So we packed up and we followed what was called the vw-campervan, and that's one of the 2 rivers from the 2 adjoining valleys, and they joined to make this in a place called vw-campervan, which is where we hiked to that morning. We followed the river down, and whilst we'd been following it right alongside, we found out they'd been carrying out lots of different works. So we found out in one area about how they'd modified the river, rather than being on the bottom photo, that's from in the past where we saw. That was for the salmon. It was a traditional run up the side, but actually they'd done a lot of engineering, mountain stabilisation to level it out and actually increase the channel flow. So we also had been taking our life straws. In our part of our preparation, we decided it was a good chance right by the river to use them to see what they were like. So we did that, and we also, following along the river, were able to see, it's interesting, their water treatment facilities, again showing their connection to it. We were aiming to go to Kandersteg that day, which was the International Scout Centre we mentioned earlier. So we followed it all the way back down to Interlaken, round on the train, and then up the next valley. Because the mountains are so tall, you don't generally go across them, so we actually ended up going all the way back where we'd been just to go down the one we were next to. So we set off that day, arrived late in the evening and explored Carnage to see what the centre was like, meet some of the people there from all around the world.
Day 9, this was our penultimate day in Switzerland, and it was the most unplanned day in Switzerland. The entire trip through, we spoke to locals and they asked us questions and we asked them. And one question that kept coming up from them was, are you going to the Jamboree? And we were like, yeah. We were thinking, they meant Carnage. Oh yeah, we're going to the permanent mini Jamboree, yeah. They didn't mean that. Which we found out about day 5, they meant that the Swiss National Jamboree, which happens every 12 to 14 years in Switzerland, and 2/3 of the Scout population in Switzerland go to. It's an international camp, but it's majority obviously Swiss. So we thought we can't miss this opportunity to go to this place and meet all these people. So we had a look on the website, MOVA was a Jamboree website, and then we emailed them, and they said, yeah, come along, we'd love to have you. There's 47 UK Scouts here so far, make it 51, why not? So we did that, so we emailed them, and to our surprise, they emailed back and said, yeah, of course. So we woke up early in this day, we were at Carnage in the morning, and we woke up at 5 a.m, 4 a.m, and got on the train, because all the trains were booked by the Jamboree site. The only way to the site was by train, because of the mountains. So they decided they'd book them all, which was very problematic for us because we couldn't get there. So we had to get up very early to get the first one out, which luckily we did. We then met Fleta and Snake, who were two of the international people, part of the international team, who guided us around. They took us first to the 47 British Scouts, who were from Lancaster, I believe, and don't know how they found out about it, because no one else we know knew about it. But they were there, and we talked about them and how they got here, and what the Jamboree was a bit of information about it. So we talked about them, and then we asked about the Swiss horn, because we emailed them before we had got the Swiss horns in the mountain, and thinking we may as well ask them, because why not at this point? And they emailed back a few days after we got Swiss horns, saying, yeah, we put a call out to Jamboree, and turns out we have a Swiss horn waiting for you at 3 o'clock on the day. So at 3 o'clock, we then met up back with Snake and Fleta, and they took us to a guy with a Swiss horn in a Swiss unit. So it was really good, because we got to meet the Swiss unit, talk to them about what they're doing, but also try this traditional Swiss horn. The ones we did before were slightly basic, because they were out all year. This was a proper, authentic wooden Swiss horn, which was really cool. While we were there on site as well, there was so many things going on. It was about 2 kilometre site in length. It was quite thin, but quite long. So a lot of people bought bikes, which we thought was a really interesting way of transport. Things about Swiss camps are very different to UK camps. What they do is they build everything out of wood. So all their tents, you can see in the photo down there, were raised on timbers and construction pieces they made by cutting down the wood in the valley before the Jamboree, and then making the structures, and then they replant the trees, I believe, because the one thing they said was they had to be sustainable. They couldn't just cut these trees down and leave the site a mess. So they made sure they didn't leave a footprint, essentially. But we met some Swiss Scouts, as I said, and also we tried Jamboree on the air. So they had to set up a unit for the event in one of their structures. I think it's the next slide. Yeah, top left. Here, in this place here, was Jamboree on the air. So we talked to a guy from Holland, Netherlands, and we talked to him about what he was doing on the day. We also went down to different tents, international tents and cultural tents, to have a look at what they're doing. And there's a Swiss horn there, you can see. He was very, very good, much better than us. Turns out it's a very difficult instrument to play. So we did that, and then once we had finished Jamboree, and it was our time to go, we left the site and got back on the train to Karmsteg. We found out the morning before that at Karmsteg, every Friday evening, every week, they have an international campfire in their campfire circle, where everyone on site comes together, sings some songs, and does some skits, which are like routines if you don't know. And so we were like, oh, we've got to go to that, we've got to make it back in time. So we waited, we sat down, and then over 800 scouts were pushed into this small pit, which sounds... Campfire circle, as you can see there. And that was, again, a real big highlight. It kind of captured the day because we went to the National Jamboree and then were surrounded by the international scouts. So we had Israeli contingents, we had Dutch, we had US, we had German, American, we had every kind of nationality really there, bar Swiss, unfortunately. So we did that, and that was just really topped off the day. And we learnt songs from all around the world. But there was actually no fire at the campfire because there was a huge drought, so there was a huge fire ban all over Switzerland. So we had some lanterns instead, but it didn't really matter. And that was day 9.
Okay, yeah, so day 10 was quite an exciting day as well, actually. It was another really early start. We didn't really want a really early start, but we didn't have a choice on this one because we were going to travel all the way down to Sion and then get a bus to visit the Grand Essence Dam. It's the largest hydroelectric dam in Switzerland, and it's the largest gravity dam in the whole world. So it's really big. This is the reservoir that it holds back. It's enormous. And this is really important to the whole electricity grid of Switzerland. It's powering like lots of their towns. It's all written about on the major project with all the statistics of how much power it generates and how many towns it's used in. So yeah, we spent a couple hours travelling there, and we got there to take a tour of the dam. The whole system runs all the way through the mountain. So this is just one small part of it. But we got to see the emergency shut-off valve, which was really big. And then go inside the dam itself, where they have tunnels where they do their inspections of the dam, see how it's moving, and that it's still structurally stable and all that. So we finished that, came out, went up to the top of the dam to see the reservoir. As you can see, it's really impressive. Yeah, and then, so we came back from there, we had to get the bus back up to Sion, and took the train from there up back to Lake Geneva for our last night of camping before the end of the whole trip. And at this point we'd had one minor project which had been bugging us for the entire trip, seemingly impossible. By this point we'd almost given up hope entirely, and that was to catch a fish, because we found that almost everywhere you weren't allowed to do fishing, you had to have a permit. Couldn't even see any fish most places we went. But we were camping, it's not a photo there, but within meters of Lake Geneva. Literally, you came out of the tent and there was the lake. It's beautiful. So we thought we'd wade into the lake up to our knees, and kind of there was loads of fish. They were everywhere, which was very exciting. And after spending enough time thrashing around with our hands trying to pull one out, I think someone said, "Oh, have we got a net?" and said that, "How about you use a tea towel?" So we got a tea towel, put it in the lake. Pretty much the first time we brought it up, there was a fish in it, which was probably one of the most exciting moments of the trip. You probably can't see it there because it's minute. It's about that big. But we were thrilled. We were, very excited. So we went to bed looking at the sunset over Lake Geneva for our last night, which was a really nice way to end the trip. And then the next day was travelling back.
Yes, unfortunately we had to leave Switzerland. You may have guessed, considering we're here, but... So we left our campsite at 9:15, and we took the train all the way down to Lausanne, which is sort of around the lake for about an hour or so. And then we went straight on the next train, which took us all the way into Paris, and we managed to arrive in Paris at 2 o'clock, which I thought was pretty good timing. So we had a bit of time in Paris, a bit more time than it is on the way there. So we managed to walk all the way to the Louvre, and we had lunch at a cafe looking directly at the Louvre building. And then we took the metro to Gare du Nord. After lunch, the Eurostar security and check-in, which was slightly more time consuming because unfortunately one of those energy gels had decided to explode in my passport. So I then had to wash it somehow and then also try and get the automatic machines to recognise it, which after about 20 minutes, half an hour, they decided, why don't we just go see a person? So we did that, and funny enough, 5 minutes later we were through, and then we finally arrived in London at 8:30 in the evening. We had to FaceTime our mentor Dave. I'm sure he was thrilled to see us at that time of the evening, where we spoke a lot about how we would prepare for this and when our initial date for the presentation would be. Do I need to scroll on that?
No.
That's good. So that was our entire trip, summarised into 40 minutes or so. And then Ned's going to tell you what we learned as we were out there.
Well, as with all these things, we put a lot of work into going out there, and we put an awful lot of planning into making it work as best as we possibly could. When we did our practice of map reading everything, and then found out that in Switzerland, the signposts are fantastic. They tell you how hard the path is going to be, and they tell you how long it's going to take to get to the next place, and when the paths are going to split. So we found actually we didn't have to do loads of map reading whilst we were out there, because it's a far more efficient country. We did also make, we did learn things. When we wrote our budget, we didn't budget to eat out. We didn't actually think about wanting to do that when we were back in this country planning it, but we decided it was there, but we left ourselves a contingency, and we were able to use this to fill in other things. So if we'd done that, we would have put thought into that as well, not just cooking every evening, because we didn't necessarily want to do that. We're very used to using cards in this country. We also found out that they still use a lot of cash out in Switzerland, particularly for the campsites. They don't want to take cards, and on the buses as well. But that's something we have prepared for, being able to take it out, but it's just an interesting, notable fact about their society still. We also had planned out our days around what the activities we would want to complete, and therefore we had budgeted how much they would cost. But when we came back, we found out it would actually have just been better just to have a pot of money to complete activities when we were out there. Going to the Swiss Jamboree was something we didn't plan on doing, so it could have been helpful to have an overall thing to use instead of, because it actually changes, it can change quite a lot out there, and you can be very flexible with what you do. And that's one of the biggest things we learned about the trip, is that we had a great plan and it all worked out, but actually you talk to people and you meet people and you see things that are of interest, and that's something you want to be able to go and find out more about.
So, lastly, to finish it all off, we have a few thanks to do. We need to thank our mentor, Dave, for helping us along the way in our preparation and everything like that, and helping us through the whole process. We need to thank county team, so Matt here, and Gerald, who was the Assistant County Commissioner for International. They gave us their support in starting the award and the process to actually get us out of the country successfully and with all the correct permits and qualifications. We need to thank everyone, such as our parents, who supported us and got us there and drove us places. We can all drive, but it's not the point. So a really big thanks to them. Everyone who supported us financially, anyone who gave money to us, we really appreciate it. I know a lot of you are here today, so thank you for that. Anyone who came to the pub quizzes, etc. like that. And then anyone else who supported us, pretty much, including our sponsor. So one thing we had, which I know other groups don't have, unfortunately, was we had a sponsor, which sponsored us for kit. They didn't give us loads of money. We had to fundraise all that. But what they did do is gave us tents and pans and really light equipment that was good quality that we could take along with us. So we took with us 3 tents, which you're here if you want to see them, weigh about, and over there, which weigh nothing. We took pans, we took stoves, titanium lightweight stoves. We took chairs with us. And because the kit was so light, it meant we could take more things, which, like a chair, which you might not need otherwise. And it pretty much saved our backs. Because on DV expeditions, you might know if scouts, they come back moaning for days because their backs are aching. We didn't really have that problem because we had the best kit. We didn't have the 14-man Explorer patrol tent because that would be awful for 12 days. So it was a really, really big help. So please do have a look around their stuff, hit the trail, and their website. There's some leaflets here as well. So yeah, that was the last really big thanks to them. And then the last bit is any questions from anyone on the floor.
What made you go for a sponsor? Did somebody suggest that, or was that something you could
Do you want to answer it? Okay. So nothing really made us go, oh, we need a sponsor. But what we did realise is we needed a kit. And we, at the time of doing it, we didn't have a group to go to ask individually. So we were wondering where to get the kit from. Do we ask district? Do we ask county? Do we ask a different scout unit explorer group? But we were offered, that we were approached actually because we had social media beforehand by Hit the Trail, saying we're starting this scheme up. Do you want to be our first pilot scheme? So we're the first one. And since there's been a few other expeditions, one to Spain I believe, who've done it. And in return to it, we had to do social media, promote them, the company, and their kit, which yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Did you sort of adopt a division of labour? Was one of you a specialist in one area, one of you did another job? How did that work?
Yeah, well, I think we shared out everything that we did. We kind of found some people are better at cooking than others, and it's always good to do well. We do that is no. Actually, although the soup has turned out very well, but we kind of found that we all worked together as a team. We tried to share things out as much as we possibly could.
Not one person took on the map reading every day, for example. It was quite a team effort, really.
Yeah. We made the decisions together about if we were going to change something, how we were going to change it. We thought about when we wanted to go to the Jamboree, we had a conversation about spending the money and moving it around and making sure it's the best decision that everyone got the most out of the trip.
Yes.
In terms of culture, how did you find the difference between places like Geneva, which is obviously like a centre for diplomats, very international, I guess, compared to the smaller kind of towns and villages that you sort of pass through?
It's massively different, and one massive difference is the language. So Geneva is French, everything's in French, and all the French-speaking parts we went to, all the signs were only in French. Whereas we went to the German-speaking parts, which were a lot more Germanic in the way of the buildings and everything was a lot more Germanic in those parts. And the signs were also in German and French. And with me speaking a bit French was quite helpful, so we could see which way to go. But also it meant that we could I could speak to some people who don't know how to speak English. And a lot of the elder population didn't speak any English at all. So I was actually able to speak to some people on different trains about their life in Switzerland. I actually learned a lot about one person in particular.
Also in the prices, Geneva is Geneva. It's really expensive. Switzerland is known for being very expensive overall, but compared to Geneva, everywhere else we went was much more kind of affordable in terms of the supermarkets and places to eat. So yeah, that was a big difference.
Yeah, we did a really big panic on the first day. We went to buy lunch in Geneva, but luckily it wasn't too bad after that.
So quickly then, high point and low point for each of you.
Start a set.
We can start.
We can start.
Okay, high point would be the Jamboree that day, because the Jamboree, we weren't expected to do it, so it was a surprise, and it was just phenomenal really, and then topped off by the International Campfire Conch. The low point, I mean the hills were hard, but the hills were really hard, the mountains, they were really difficult on the legs and the back and all this, but it was actually not bad because the views are incredible. If you hike in the mountain, in the hills, whatever, in England, you get clouds and rain and it's cold, it's damp. But there it was just beautiful scenery everywhere you went. So although it was difficult, it was not really low. There wasn't really bad things about the trip, particularly.
I'd say for me the best bit was staying on the mountain hut that day. The walk up was incredible, being able to going past the lakes, seeing the wildlife, and then by the time you're up there, just the view all around, watching the sunset was incredible. And it was a lovely atmosphere going into with all these other people that were doing the same thing, and they were the only people there because they all wanted to be there to do that one thing. And then the walk back down the other side was equally amazing. It was so lovely weather. I don't know, the lowest point, it was a brilliant trip. I think probably waking Christopher up is the hardest thing a policeman to do. And they don't like doing it. No, it was a great trip.
Yeah, I was going to say staying in a mountain, but I won't say that because that wasn't good with sunsets and sunrise. I also staying on Lake Geneva on the last night was just really nice. Low point, I would say, is seeing the showers at Carnstead. A scout centre with all those teenagers staying there. Showers didn't look great.
we did nice campsites.
The other campsites were quite reasonable, but that one we didn't use the showers there. That was dangerous. That was my low point.
Well, this question's got very difficult at this end. High point, I would say I loved walking up the mountain. I think it was much nicer than walking down the mountain personally. The views were just incredible. All the time the views were incredible. There wasn't a bad view. Even in Geneva in the city there was good views all the way around. I think probably the lowest point was setting up tents in the rain. But that's the low point of many camp. You always set up tents in the rain. Yeah, there's so many high points. I think there are so many things we could keep listing as high points, but then we just explain the whole trip again.
Take a lot of time. Yeah.
Any more questions?
No one's.
What would you say to what would you say to like young people that would be interested in doing this?
I'll go for it. It's great. It's worth the effort to do. If you're going to do it, put the time in before to make sure that when you're out there, you can have the best time you can. But I don't think it's an award that seems, from our experience of talking to people, it's not something that's necessarily done. It's not particularly common, as common as say a DB, but it is brilliant to be able to go and have the experience of planning it all yourself and the satisfaction that you know that you put all that effort in and that you've got so much out of it.
A once in a lifetime experience.
And make sure you have a big enough budget because
It's
once you're
worth it.
out there, you want to be able to make the most of everything that you can do. So you want to have a budget that can accommodate that.
I know you didn't have a net or a line or hooks or anything, so that's one bit of kit you didn't have that you wished you had. Was there another bit of kit you didn't have and you wished you'd taken?
Did you wish you had a chair?
No, I didn't actually. I was the one person who insisted I wasn't going to take a chair, but I did regret it. I mean, that's their decision. I allow that, but yeah. No.
I think we had everything.
I think we had most things. I think my sleeping bag, mine was a summer sleeping bag, which was fine generally when it was really hot, 30-degree heat. But then when it rained in Carnstead, it got a little bit cold. I did have a liner as well, and I could wear clothes obviously. But I thought that was the one thing which, do it again, I'd probably take a slightly warmer sleeping bag, as long as it wasn't like Seb's, which took the entire bag.
Yeah, but he was incredibly
It was incredibly warm, I loved it. But yeah, that may be the one thing I slightly change next time.
No, I think we had everything.
Maybe a grater with slightly bigger options.
Yeah, the cheese grater for the potatoes.
What thought of taking the grater?
We got a grater, so.
Anything else?
I was just going to say, if you were to do it all over again, you could go to Switzerland, where would you
Norway.
Norway? Yeah.
I personally, I think Norway. Or the Maldives.
I'm on to Iceland next.
Oh,
Iceland. We did speak about this more.
Where?
Iceland.
Yeah. Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah, but then the prices there are probably worse than Switzerland. That was mainly the
We
reason.
can just do another award.
Yeah, we should do it.
Okay.
Anything else?
Fantastic. If I could just say a huge thank you to these guys. My name is Dave. I was actually their mentor for the trip. It's the first time I've ever mentored anybody to do their Explore About. And these guys were an amazing group to work with. And I think their presentation really did them proud of what they actually went through, what they achieved. I mean, to get out there at the time of a jamboree as well, which, you know, we have jamborees every 4 years, which are world jamborees. And only, you know, very few people actually get to go to one. So for these guys to be out there and witness a Swiss Jamboree, and also to be able to go to a national centre like Kansas out there. I thought your presentation was amazing, very envious, and I think the way you kind of went about it, embraced it, and took on your projects and your minor projects as well. I thought it was fantastic. And it's amazing what introduction a staff can give you, and just talking to people, and that gives you leads into other things, and people are really receptive abroad, and particularly to young people like yourselves that are enthusiastic, that want to learn and embrace the culture and that. So I'd say brilliant, fantastic. You really did yourselves proud there. You've been an amazing group to work with, and hopefully we can get this signed off and present you with your for the Explorer belt. You get an Explorer buckle, don't you? So on their belts. And to be honest, I mean, I was talking to Joe, and we don't think that anyone in Horsham's had the Explorer belt.
Well, I think unfortunately you're going to be a hard act to follow. But I think you personally sitting here with my brain whirring, you've given us an opportunity now, exactly like that young lady said, to hang on to what you've put together and shown us, to inspire the next lot and the next lot and the next lot, and for them to not see it as something that's out of reach, because what you've seen and what you've done and your enthusiasm and the way you've brought that back and shared it is only going to inspire other people. So please don't just fold it all up and put it all away. We need to work on a plan to get this out to be shown to people, because you've just proved it can be done, and have fun, and what an achievement. I'm blown away. Because I know you all, and I think you've all done amazing things.
Well, when you think we first started planning this during the middle of COVID, where we couldn't even meet face to face, it was just on computers and that, but we still managed to get it going, and then you've got your expedition underway and so on. So brilliant. We should give them a round of applause.
Anyone feels they want to look at anything else, it's all here. We won't kick you out. But if anyone thinks of any other questions you'd like to ask us, but
Did you put the fish back?
we did. It's happily living its life.
It was too small to do it.
We thought this was a good way of not breaking any rules about fishing. We just popped it out.
But apart from that, thank you all very much for coming and for listening to us.
Small food left as well.
I think go away some the chocolates, come on.
There's soup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hope you enjoyed the campfire.